You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, welcome to our 100th episode.
Yeah, the big 100.
Yeah, we should
I cannot believe it's
congratulate
been 2
ourselves.
years.
Yeah, it has been 2 years. It doesn't seem like 2 years.
Yeah.
The time has flown. And I think that us doing this podcast for 2 years now, this is one of my favorite activities, actually. I really look forward to our recording days.
Mm-hmm.
Do you look forward to them also?
Yes, I'm sure our 3 listeners also look forward to the release date.
3 listeners, yes. Okay, well, let's see. You and me, we're 2, and then, well, even my mom
No, I
doesn't
meant
listen.
outside the two of us, so a
Oh,
total of
outside,
5.
a total of 5. So we have 3
Yeah.
people plus
Hi,
Matt and
Mom.
Albert. I would say hi, Mom, but even my mom doesn't listen to it.
That's a low bar.
That's a low bar, and we're not even clearing that one.
Yeah.
So we were talking about what should we talk about for our 100th episode. And we were thinking about, I think it was you who suggested it, is what has changed for us in the presentation world over the past 2 years. Is that right?
If and what? Yeah. If something
Yeah.
has
If
changed,
something
and
has changed
if
for
so,
the
what is it?
past, yeah. And so I thought about that. And so I have an idea about what has changed. Should I go first, or
Sure.
do you want to
Sure.
go
Go
first, or
for it.
what? Okay. So I guess the main impact isn't really something that has changed 180 degrees. It's more of something that got emphasized a bit stronger. Because, yeah, if you asked me about this 2 years ago, I pretty much would have agreed with you, but now I would agree more strongly. So, yeah, I guess it hasn't changed 180 degrees. It's
Mm-hmm.
just become stronger. And let's back up for a moment to something completely unrelated to presentations. And don't worry, I'm going to tie it into presentations in a few moments. So I'm not going to leave you hanging or anything. But at the
Okay.
beginning, it's going to sound completely unrelated. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
So here we go. Okay. So I'm reading a book these days called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
I love that.
And yeah, so you've read that book before, huh?
Several times actually, yeah. And
Okay,
I
yeah.
I just open the book, flip some pages, and do some occasional reading every now and then.
Yeah, and I guess you could say that I'm rereading it
Mm-hmm.
because I have also read it a couple times before. It's an excellent book. If you haven't already read it, I highly recommend that you check it out. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So anyway, in this book, he talks about what he calls the tail, and he's a U.S. writer. I think he's a U.S. writer, isn't he? A U.S. writer?
I'm not sure, but I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So he's writing about the U.S. stock market, but this seems to apply to stock markets pretty much everywhere, and this idea of the tail. And this idea of the tail is that in any given year, most of the progress in the market comes from just a couple companies. And whether it's the market or an index of the market, most of the progress in that market is just coming from a couple companies. And he says that actually most of the companies in the market or in that index are actually pretty much dogs. They're either losing value, or maybe they're even going bankrupt, or they're going out of business in some way, or at best they're staying flat. So I think he looks at 2017,
Mm-hmm.
and he uses the case in 2017. He says something like, I think 7% of the advance in the S&P 500, an index of the U.S. stock market, 7% of the advance came from just one company, Amazon. I think that was the point that he was making. And the another point that he makes when he's talking about this tail is that in order to capture the market's progress for yourself, you just have to show up and be there. He says that you've got to own the dogs just as much as you might own the companies that are rocking,
Okay.
because you don't know at the outset who's going to be a dog and who's going to rock. You don't know that. So you just have to buy everything and stay there. And I thought about that a little bit, and this podcast is kind of like that. And first, I'll talk about the podcast, and then I'll get into how it ties into presentations. And as a good parent, here I'm speaking a parent of this podcast. Basically, I've got to say in public that I love all of my children equally. They all bring their own special value to the world. It wouldn't be politically correct of me or parentally correct of me to pick favorites. But the reality is that of our 100 episodes, many of them are not particularly good. And
That's for
most,
sure.
yeah, that's for
No need to
sure.
be politically correct there. I don't love all my children equally in that regard.
Yeah. And by definition, a lot of those episodes are below average by definition. But a few of the episodes absolutely rock. They're awesome episodes. And even after we've been doing this for 2 years, I'll go back and I'll listen to those episodes, for the 5th or 10th or 15th or 20th time, just because that particular episode really rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get the ones that rock, you've got to put up with the dogs. It's kind of like this guy Morgan Housel talking about
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
stocks in the stock market. In order to get the ones that really rock, you've got to put up with the dogs. And for you and me, that means that in order to record the episodes that rock, we've got to record the duds. And that's the value of the 100 episodes, is that it
Yeah.
shows that, we showed up 100 times and kept recording, and now we have a few that rock. So we might have spent, 2 years and we're on episode 100. It's not like, all 100 episodes rock, all 100 episodes are awesome, but there are a
Mm-hmm.
few who rock, and we wouldn't have got those if we didn't do 100 episodes. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking of how it can be related to the presentations that our listeners make or anybody makes, such as there is no room for the unrealistic expectation that I'm going to make one presentation and I'm going to
Yeah.
ace it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of being fully prepared to ace the presentation. I think it's a matter of being fully prepared, of course, on one hand, but on the
Mhm.
other hand, accepting the fact that things may not go as well as you planned,
Yeah.
and that they shouldn't stop you from preparing or even wanting to do the next one, because it's going to be. I like the phrase of having the dogs around. I think there are going to be a lot of doggy presentations, let's call
Uh,
them,
yeah.
and there will be one or two that you will ace, and
By the
those
way,
are going to
I love
go
that
ahead.
phrase, doggy
Doggy.
presentations.
Okay, I was skeptical if it could be pulled in a completely different meaning in English language because I wasn't sure about that.
No, I
But
think
yeah,
that's a great phrase.
yeah, I'm sure there are
So,
going to be a lot of them, and some of them in between those doggy presentations, they're going to be fantastic, and I think you will be remembered by those.
yeah, and that's pretty much what you have just said describes what has changed for me over the past couple years. Is that when we started this 2 years ago, I wanted to believe that every time someone goes to bat, they're going to knock it out of the park. And
Hmm.
that's a total American baseball metaphor for you. So
Yeah, you like
I'm
that.
gonna yeah, so I'm gonna restate it without a metaphor for
Hmm.
our non-American audience. And that is that 2 years ago, I wanted to believe that every time someone makes an attempt, they're going to be awesome. But yeah, that's too much to expect. And I know that, as trainers by nature, we want to believe that we can make someone so awesome that 100% of the time they're just totally going to rock the world and everyone's going to think they're awesome. But the reality is that that's not going to happen.
Hmm.
I think the best that anyone can do is show up on day one, and then show up again on day two, and then show up again on day three, and
Hmm.
be pretty good and good enough so that they get invited back, so that on day 19 or day 26 or day 63 or whenever the magic happens, whenever the stars align and everything's perfect and the truly memorable thing that everyone remembers for 10 years, they happen to be in the room on that day. And so we as trainers, our job is not to make them 100% of the time, because if you had asked me, 2 years ago, what's our job, then I would have thought that our job is to make them awesome 100% of the time. But that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Our job is just to make them good enough so that they get called back on day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and so on and so forth. And so when the stars align and the magic happens, they're in the room for on that particular day. And that's the most that we can do as trainers, is make them good enough. And I know that's not a resounding, that is definitely not a resounding sales pitch, because not only have I said that, yeah, most of our podcast episodes aren't that great, I've also said
Well,
that.
but that is true. I mean, obviously there are some better ones than the doggier ones, let's say doggy episodes, but that's for
Yeah.
sure.
And so not only have I said that there are some dogs in our stable of 100 episodes, but I also said that, yeah, the most that we can do as trainers is make people good enough. So that's not a resounding sales pitch. It's like, I'm going to hire Matt because he's going to make me good enough.
Not perfect, but good enough.
Yeah. So okay. So to restore the faith of our potential customers out there, hire Matt because he's going to make you awesome all the time. Okay. So that's my take on it.
Yeah,
That's my
what could
take on.
possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah. That's my take on what has changed over the past couple of years for me, is that the expectations have become reset and are a little more realistic. How about you? What would you say has changed for you over the past 100 episodes?
Well, I actually have something very similar to the lines that you were talking about, in the sense that um, there hasn't been a significant change or something new, but an
Okay.
idea has been gaining more
Mm,
force and it has been becoming more concrete on my mind.
sure.
And like you, the source of this is not my own, but it's from a book that I read. If I'm not mistaken, it was this famous book by Mark Manson on the art of not giving. Okay, I'm
Mm.
not going to turn this podcast into explicit. So you know the book I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. I've never read it, but I'm very familiar with that book. It's
Yeah.
it's got one of the most famous titles ever.
I think 90%, I feel 90% is from that book. It could be from another book, but I can check with that later. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea was, I think he was talking about speeches or presentations, and how at the end of every speech or presentation that you make, there will be the possibility that and in some cases, not a single person will understand what on earth you're talking about.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not going to be because of you.
Uh,
Sometimes it's going to be completely because of the audience. So I think this quote or this paragraph in the book was talking about, sometimes you just need to let go of the outcome. There may
yeah.
be moments in which, against your best efforts, I mean, take all the 99 episodes that we made
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
summarize them, and apply every single one of the advice that we dispersed in those episodes
Yeah.
into your next speech.
Uh,
There still is the possibility that at the end of your speech or presentation, no one will get what on earth
true.
you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Good point. Good point.
And it won't necessarily mean that you messed something up.
Yeah.
It may just mean that, I don't know, the stars were not aligned correctly, Saturn was in
Yeah.
retro or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's important at that point not to take it too personally,
Yeah.
and just move on. I think it's one of the things that has gained more strength in my conscious and subconscious at the same time about presentations. And I think it's something important to remember,
Yeah.
especially since we talked about doggy presentations. If you find yourself towards the end of a doggy presentation, of course it would be wise to think about why that happened, and
Yeah.
and of course analyze what you can do better the next time. But sometimes it's just, I think, better to just let go and accept that it just happened and move on
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. here on this podcast, we talk about knowing your audience a lot, and we talk about that seemingly pretty much every episode in some way, shape, or form. So I don't want everybody to go running off and saying, "Hey, I don't have to care anymore." Alper says that it's okay to flub every single presentation I ever get, because that's not what Alper's
that's not
saying
what I'm
at all.
talking about. No.
Yeah,
No,
there's
that's
a
not what I'm talking about.
long space, or a long distance between zero just starting out and what Alper is talking about right now. So definitely, while you're crossing that space, totally buy into this, know your audience thing. What Alper is talking about right here is definitely a pro tip, is that sometimes you just can't help it.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to let it go.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I was thinking about, which you mentioned, was about the ChatGPT. And you and I talked about this before. When we started the podcast, it didn't exist. I think we started in March of 2022, and I think it came around in November of the same year.
That's true.
And it has penetrated the presentation realm to the point of creating the content, creating the visuals, etc. Again, I wouldn't say something has changed, but I think it has made more concrete, again, my feeling that the human-to-human connection has become ever more valuable and important.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Especially in the presentations, especially in the speeches, because I liked how you said before, like in a previous episode, you talked about how ChatGPT or any engine like that was basically modeling the human output that existed, and most of it was garbage.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, inevitable that right now we are churning out even more garbage at a faster rate, and it is visible.
Yeah. ChatGPT. That should be their tagline. ChatGPT, enabling more garbage.
Yeah.
A world with more garbage.
They could be laughing at us, by the way, as two dinosaurs, but I think I will feel comfortable underlining my feeling, not the fact, my feeling that the need for organic, genuine, gluten-free, free-range communications has become. I stole it from Jonathan Stark, by the way. I think it's becoming more and more valuable. I think it's going to be one of the distinguishing factors in the short to medium term, if not in the long term as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
So here we are, two dinosaurs talking about 99 episodes that we did before.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? Shall we from here, shall we wrap it up and move on to episode number 101, or should we call it quits here?
Yes, because otherwise this will become one of those ranting sessions where we're going to talk for another 30 minutes and bore our 3 listeners to death.
Yeah, we don't want to bore our 3 listeners to death.
Yeah,
when you only
they're
have
hanging
3,
by a thread.
Yeah, when you only have 3, everyone counts.
Yeah. So okay, let's pick up with 101.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up 100 here, and we'll pick up with 101. But thank you very much to our 3, maybe even 4 listeners.
You never know.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you never know. Thank you very much for hanging on for our 100 episodes, and we hope that you get as much out of the next 100 as you did out of these 100.
Yeah, see you in the 200th episode.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Alper. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.